Find a job you enjoy doing, and you will never have to work a day in your life, is a quote attributed to one of the fathers of American literature, Mark Twain. While I'm sure Mr. Twain means well, in our hyper-capitalist world, this quote has been reduced to utter bupkis. But despite our rise and grind culture, there is still something to be said for what this quote hints at. Work is going to feel less like work if there is something you truly love being made. Japanese game development in the 90s was notoriously brutal. In the years since, it has become more and more known that some of our favorite games of this era were made off the backs of inhumane crunch hours. Employees would pull titanic workdays and go weeks without a break, some even sleeping at their desks. In 1994, treasure designer Hiroshi Yuchi talked in an interview with Beep Mega Drive magazine about how the amount of overtime the industry demands broke him down to the point where he was hospitalized and feared for his life. Early in Sakaguchi's career at Square, he would practically live at the office, stating in a Eurogamer interview that he was so broke that he stayed in a rented apartment that was Square's office because it had air conditioning and a bath. In a couple episodes, we will see a rather famous example of health-threatening overwork happening at Square during one of their biggest games ever. Now, I don't want to say anything that justifies or adds a lens of Stockholm Syndrome to this, because for many employees, this crunch has just become a part of the job thrust upon them. But to some rare few, they work this hard because they wish to see their vision made into reality. Development is exhausting work, filled with turmoil and difficulty, and it's possible that some look back on their creations and only see the stress it caused their life. Understandably so, but others have been able to look back and see not the dark times, but instead see the joy in having birthed something great throughout all of that. And I use the term birth purposefully, as Sakaguchi has described making games as bringing a new child into the world. Today we take a look at the last Final Fantasy game Hironobu Sakaguchi directed, and, as it would stand for the rest of the 90s, the Final Fantasy Sakaguchi would hold to as his favorite, Final Fantasy V. By all accounts, Final Fantasy IV was a huge success. Famitsu gave it the second highest score of that year, only losing to Link of the Past, and sales had been ever so slightly higher than Final Fantasy III. This is just me theorizing, but I think that number is still highly impressive when considering FF4 required new hardware and a new install base compared to the late-stage NES game. I don't think my FF3 video really got across how beloved that game is to Japan. For the old-school subset of Japanese gamer, FF3 is touted as a big moment, and from what I've read around since, it's still held up highly in a nostalgic sense. However, what criticism there was, the staff took to heart. In a 1992 developer interview, visual scene designer Keizuo Kokubo said that some players had found FF4 too linear and boring, and the team was taking that into account. Sakaguchi also said that FF5 would not be a distillation of previous Final Fantasies, but a, quote, kind of fun they haven't experienced yet. There's always been this narrative behind the early Final Fantasy releases that the odd-numbered ones are system-based games and the even-numbered ones are story-based games. At a distance, this does seem to pan out this way, but it's mostly unintentional. One of Sakaguchi's design philosophies was that every game should be its own complete and unique experience. In fact, during an interview with IGN, Sakaguchi says the following: "I don't like sequels. I hate them. That's why every single Final Fantasy has a new cast of characters, a brand new story, and a different system. Our promise to ourselves is that for every single game that we make, we are going to give it our all, and then we finish it. We'll end it in such a way that there is no to-be-continued checklist." It only makes sense that these games have a tendency to ping-pong between modes as the series rolls on. I doubt that after finishing a story-heavy game, Sakaguchi would want the staff to turn around and create something in a similar mold. To help facilitate Final Fantasy V being packed with a new flavor, the staff were now using 16 megabit carts as opposed to FF4's 8 megabit ones. Final Fantasy V marks a more formal introduction of the important Final Fantasy staff. For starters, the previously introduced Yoshinori Kitase hopped on his first FF. doing field and event planning as well as writing the scenario alongside Sakaguchi. Tetsuya Nomura was given his first real job, upgraded from debugging with the kids, as he once jokingly put it, to designing the monsters. Nomura describes FF5 as the turning point for his career, as not only was he working in a more important role, but he was being taught by Sakaguchi, Kitase, Hiroyuki Ito, and someone who has been in the background since FF4, the man who would go on to make the Xeno series, Tetsuya Takahashi. As mentioned alongside Final Fantasy III, this is one of the more lost games in the North American chronology. Like previous releases, a translation and stateside release was planned. In fact, translator Ted Woolsey had almost everything completed and ready to go, but Square pulled back on the idea. The Japanese staff believed the West was not ready for this type of JRPG just yet, especially on the back of Final Fantasy II US. In a 1994 interview, Ted Woolsey describes FF5 as just not accessible enough to the average gamer, and it was this line of thinking that had Square pivot to make Mystic Quest for North American fans instead. There was an additional attempt to make a North American release happen via contracting out studio Top Dog for a Windows port, but this petered out as well. Another attempt in 1988 was made with IDOS, but this too fell apart. Because of this, Final Fantasy V is one of the first major games to receive a fan translation, having an English patch ROM done by translation group RPGE. Unlike FF3, however, FF5 follows a bit more of FF2's path. Burgerland would eventually get Final Fantasy V on PlayStation 1 in 1999, alongside its Goofy translation, see Pirate Ferris, and then in 2006 it would be released on the Game Boy Advanced.
Post-Production Jay here. I just wanted to throw a little context onto those last two releases. Yeah, we did have the game on PS1, but it was a really bad version, and I don't really have sales in numbers for how well it did, but also the GBA release, I don't even remember that happening, and I paid attention at the time. I would have picked up on this, but I just don't even remember that game coming to GBA, and it came out in GBA in 2006. That's so far past, the point where someone would be super interested in Final Fantasy V. 2006 is when Final Fantasy 12 comes out. It's so far past the sell-by date, and I don't think those ever did good either, because I literally do not remember Square being yeah, we made it for GBA in 2006.
However, in Japan, the path of Final Fantasy V is less muddy, as it came out like a fucking storm. In the first day, Final Fantasy V nearly quintupled the sales of Final Fantasy IV, and it went on to hit the 2 million mark in just 2 months. The tea leaves had foretold the game's success, as it was reported that Japanese authorities asked Square to not release FF5 on a school day for fear of children skipping en masse to get in line for it. Final Fantasy V would be the second highest selling game for Japan in 1992, only being beaten by longtime genre partner / rival Dragon Quest and their 5th release. JRPGs were in, baby, and the genre's dominance throughout the 16-bit era was not about to stop. We talked about it in the Final Fantasy IV video, but the SNES era of Final Fantasies would show more incremental graphical improvements between releases. I described Final Fantasy IV as looking somewhat flat, like they were still designing with the NES art in mind, but spruced up with the added power of the Super Famicom. While this is nowhere near the final form of what Square was able to do, there is a notable update in detail. If you compare the opening scenes from the first 2 games, you can just look at how different the 2 castles are. Final Fantasy IV's Baron Castle is perfectly fine looking, but the castle details in Final Fantasy V blow it away. Obviously there's a lot more detail and dimensionality at play in Final Fantasy V, but look at the repeating texture patterns. In FF5, I find a lot of the texture patterns more craftily weaved in to look less like repeating squares. It's a little hard for me to go back and look at FF5 and see it as that much of an improvement because I am poisoned with the knowledge of what a fucking masterpiece Final Fantasy VI is. But the team at Square made significant upgrades to the look of Final Fantasy with 5. But other than raw graphics, another huge change is emotive animations. FF5 does a lot of following in FF3's footsteps. not just in gameplay, but also in sense of humor. This is greatly bolstered by a new range of animations for our characters. They will laugh, be in shock, be curious, and overall are much more emotive than past games. One of the biggest changes is that our characters all have unique sprites for their take on a job. Some jobs look all mostly similar with personal touches of the character. Some look wildly different per character. Like monk, dancer, ninja, or samurai are all super different depending on who is rocking them. This also affects animations because not every job has a standardized animation. Check out Monk Lena's fully unique cast animation. All of this combines to create a huge forward push for the look of the game. It may not be a massive upgrade for raw graphical horsepower, but it goes wide with so many cool looking sprites and animations that it blows the previous Final Fantasies out of the water. I don't find the soundtrack as good as 4's, but it's still quite impressive. I think, like a lot of things, it comes off feeling like a sequel to FF3. The overworld theme from 5 has a certain tonal resemblance to me as the iconic overworld theme from FF3. I think a lot of Uematsu's work here comes off as adventurous, not in the experimental sense, but in the way it evokes classic sword and spells fantasy adventure. Right from the main theme, I think you can hear it. The Harvest song that plays in certain towns has this cheery fantasy town melody that is almost too perfect. I don't know how else to describe it. And what sticks out to me as an iconic track is To the North Mountain. This bombastic march is overflowing with vim and vigor of brave adventurers and is maybe one of the best examples at getting that tone I'm trying to describe across. I will say, however, this may be my least favorite battle theme so far. It comes in a little too strong and dramatic, failing to land the way I want it to. The soundtrack can get away with some missteps here, because we get another one of Uematsu's epic boss themes, Battle at the Big Bridge. This song fucking smacks. Strong, aggressive, makes you want to run headfirst into your next adversary and come out the other side, while still being a little noodly in parts to give it this progressive rock edge. It's one of the key songs remembered from this game, and for good reason. You get pumped when it shows up for a fight. With Yoshinori Kitase properly showing up, it's as good of a time as any to discuss him. I would liken the inclusion of Kitase as the sequel of sorts to the series promoting Takashi Tokita in Final Fantasy IV. Tokita had an interest in theater, which I theorize played heavily into the story-based direction of Final Fantasy IV. Similarly, Kitase was deeply interested in film, studying both filmmaking and screenwriting, but showing a particular knack for post-production editing. While Kitase was originally employed by a small animation studio, he gained an appreciation for video games thanks to Dragon Quest, and especially Final Fantasy I. After quitting the animation studio, he was still looking for film-related jobs when he saw that Square was hiring. In a move that we millennials can only weep over and fruitlessly deny as being actually real, Kitase interviewed with no programming or game dev skills and was successfully hired off the back of showing Sakaguchi a stop animation project he did back in university. As mentioned in the Final Fantasy III episode, Kitase started on the Game Boy with Seiken Densetsu, aka Final Fantasy Adventure. During this time, he talks about sleeping at the office every single night. He recalls, "I can remember that Mr. Tokita, the lead programmer on Final Fantasy IV, and other colleagues would play guitars and laugh and chat while I arranged 3 chairs by the side of my desk as a makeshift bed and fell asleep watching them out of the corner of my eye." Guys, I'm really not joking about the state of game dev crunch back then. But after this, Kitase would be taken under Sakaguchi's wing, working alongside him with Final Fantasy V before taking his mentor's spot as director when Sakaguchi had to focus on more corporate responsibilities. This would leave Kitase as director for some of the most important games in the series, 6, 7, 8, and 10. While he would eventually move into more producer roles, Kitase continues to work with the series and is responsible for event scripting, comparing it, in his words, to directing film actors. Much like his mentor, Kitase would also end up on the corporate side of Square, where he would hold multiple executive director roles, as well as being a member on the board of directors. In 2021, he was given the role of brand manager for Final Fantasy, replacing longtime Square producer and Kingdom Hearts co-creator Shinji Hashimoto. When Sakaguchi left Square, there was a bit of a vacuum. Sakaguchi wasn't just an important figure to Square and Final Fantasy. Sakaguchi was Final Fantasy in the eyes of the public. While the public consciousness would likely see Tetsuya Nomura as the face of Final Fantasy, and nowadays Yoshi P has kind of taken that role, the true heir to Sakaguchi in regards to Square and Final Fantasy has always been Kitase. He was Sakaguchi's protege when they both worked together, and Sakaguchi has said that Kitase is the one he passed the torch to. Between the turmoil of the merger and the highs and lows of the company, Kitase has always been there with a hand on the beloved series, trying to guide it to be the best it can be. If Final Fantasy III was the game that introduced jobs, then Final Fantasy V is the game that launched it into the stratosphere. This is the job system game in many people's eyes, and it's not hard to see why. While the amount of jobs has barely increased, the variety of them is much wider. Gone are the Final Fantasy III jobs that acted like straight upgrades, and in their place are some of the jobs that would go on to become iconic parts of the series moving forward, like Blue Mage, Chemist, and Time Mage. That itself is cool, but the way you mix and match jobs is what takes this game into overdrive. When selecting a job, you will get that job's unique skills, but you'll also get the chance to equip an ability from another job skill list. These are unlocked by leveling that job up. The easiest example would be White or Black Mage. By becoming a White Mage, you will natively get access to performing level 6 White Magic. But if you level up your White Mage to level 3, you can now have up to level 3 White Magic be an ability on any other job. So in this example, if your level 3 White Mage then switches to Knight, they have all the normal job attributes a Knight would have, but they could also equip the level 3 White Magic job ability. This sort of multi-classing not only removes any sense of buyer's remorse when leveling jobs, but it is the key to what makes FF5 so enticing to people. You can mix and match wild combinations to create very broken combos, and that's absolutely the type of shit we are sickos for. Also improved from Final Fantasy III is how jobs affect stats. Each character has a base of 4 stats: strength, agility, stamina, and magic. And each job will come with a modifier for those stats. So for example, when you select the White Mage job, you get a -7 to your strength, a +1 to your agility, no change to your stamina, and +25 to your magic. Some abilities will also carry stat modifiers. Keeping with White Magic, if you select the White Magic ability, there will be a plus value to your magic depending on the level, assuming you are not already getting a more powerful plus value magic modifier from somewhere else. Now, job abilities are only for the specific character who has been leveling them. If Lena is a level 3 White Mage, then only she will be able to select the level 3 White Magic ability if she changes jobs. But there have been some changes since FF3 to make everything else a bit more universal. For starters, magic charges are dead and gone and never coming back. All the fussing with charges and charge levels across multiple jobs is donezo. MP amounts are now handled by your magic stat and stat modifier. Similarly, magic spells are no longer learned per person. In FF3, it was the specific characters who would learn spells, but now in FF5, the whole party learns those spells, and it's just a matter of who has the job skills or abilities to access them. This is so much fucking nicer and makes all the thinking behind who has what go away. Now leveling your job no longer has a nebulous system behind it. Instead, you now have the regular EXP you've come to know and love, but also an APB that relates to your job level. Where EXP is a larger number with more fluctuations for monster variety, APB is much more standardized, typically only granting a single APB per battle or so until the late game. In parallel to this, APB values needed to level up are mostly pretty small until you get to the last couple. Each level will grant you a new ability, either a command for battle or a support ability. Do note that command abilities are not naturally parts of a job, since they are additional battle commands that have to be selected as an ability even if they are from that job, which makes some command abilities less enticing because you only get one ability and it's gotta be worth it. Each job has roughly 6 or 7 levels, but this does vary, and there are some classes like Berserker who are big outliers. Now here's where shit really hits the fan. If you get to the final level of a class, it is considered mastered, and any class you have mastery of will feed back into 2 classes: your starting class of Freelancer and the unlockable class of Mime. In FF3, the Onion Knight was straight poopy, but there was a world where you could grind them up into beastly classes. If that was worth it or not is a different question. A similar and more applicable line of thinking is in FF5. The Freelancer is your endgame class because the mastered classes will give their best stat bonus or bonuses and their innate support skills to Freelancer and Mimes. These don't stack. Instead, they will take the best stat bonus of all available mastered classes. So if you master Red Mage, then the Freelancer and Mime will get Red Mage's +8 strength, +5 agility, and +8 magic. If you then master White Mage, you will keep the Red Mage's strength and agility stat bonuses, but you upgrade to the White Mage's superior +25 stat bonus. Can you see why people fucking love this game? This is raw as fuck! For those who are looking to max class the Freelancer and Mime, the Monk gives the best strength and stamina stat bonus, the Thief gives the best agility stat bonus, and the Summoner gives the best magic stat bonus. But the other thing Mastery gives is the native support abilities. With some exceptions, the non-command job skills will all feed back to Freelancer and Mime. This means passive combat skills like Monk's Counter or overworld skills like Thief's Sprint or Geomancer's Find Pits will be added. There are not a large list of these, but almost all of them have cool bennies, like getting Knight's Cover, or Samurai's Shirahadori isn't going to have a downside. Understandably, this job system has become the thing Final Fantasy V is known for. So much so that a popular challenge run called the 4-Job Fiesta has cropped up. Many moons ago, the 4-Job Fiesta was, and technically still is, a charity event of challenge runs where you have to complete Final Fantasy V with only 4 random jobs assigned to you. There is a lot of variety in this, as certain types of 4-Job Fiesta runs will have different rules for what types of job pools you will get access to. But at its core, you get 4 jobs, only 4 jobs, and you gotta find a way to beat the game with only those 4 jobs. While typically this is held as a summer charity event between June and September, the 4-Job Fiesta is popular enough to just become a standalone challenge run people do out of event season. Final Fantasy V uses the ATB system again, but I think it's noticeably different this time around. When it was introduced in 4, the concept of offset turns was novel enough, but a lot of emphasis was put on charge times. Many spells and abilities would not fire off immediately, and you would have to plan around the fact that such a long wait was required. This feels almost entirely gone from 5. With only some rare exceptions, anything you choose to do will happen pretty much immediately after you make your selection, and the few things that need a charge time, like aim, do not take anywhere near as long as they did in 4. I don't mind this change, but I do think something was a little lost in this. I like the strategy in having to plan around charge times, and I totally see it not fitting into a game as wide with options as 5, but I hope it comes back for 6. I think the only other thing I'd like to mention is that FF5 feels like the big ramp up on powerful items. Items with special abilities have been around from the beginning. Shit, I wasn't gonna beat 2 without the Blood Sword Cheese strat, but I think the amount of powerful items has increased significantly in 5. This isn't just weapons that could also be used to cast spells or armor that has special abilities, but really powerful and niche shit like items that dramatically make Beastmaster abilities easier to use, or a knife that gives you the chance to use the Dancer's dance ability instead of attacking. Some of these feel just as important as ability choices when putting together a build, so maybe it's always been increasing and this is the breaking point, but it feels worthwhile mentioning during 5. Also, I keep nearly forgetting to mention this. There are actually 4 bonus jobs in the Game Boy Advance and delisted Steam/mobile version. Necromancer, Cannoneer, Oracle, and Gladiator. Necromancers get access to their own suite of dark magic called the Dark Arts and are stuck in an undead status effect. Cannoneers are like offensive chemists, able to mix items for explosions and have a ranged ability that attacks with a chance of random status ailments. Oracles also deal in the randomness, being a job of powerful yet random magic effects that could benefit the enemy instead of you. Finally, gladiators are powerful melee attackers with a bit of hodgepodge of skills not used, like the enemy enticing lure or the old FF3 Dark Knight's Blade Blitz. Oh god, we're done. We're finally done. I'm so winded. Final Fantasy V, while maybe not being known as the story-heavy game of series, comes out of the gates swinging. A problem plagues the land. The wind has stopped. Princess Lena of Tycoon watches her father leave for the Wind Shrine to try and solve it, but he can only watch as the crystal within splits to pieces. Elsewhere, a traveler named Bartz and his chocobo Boku see a large meteorite land nearby. After investigating, he finds Lena and an old amnesiac named Galuf. They thank Bartz as they both realize they are heading to the Wind Shrine. Bartz does not follow, but shortly doubles back to save them from oncoming monsters and earthquakes. Together, the three find a pirate hideout and plan on stealing a ship to make it to the Wind Shrine that way. However, the pirate captain Ferris discovers them and locks them up, but not before noticing Lena has a pendant very similar to Ferris's. The wind may have stopped, but Ferris's ship is powered by a sea creature she has known since she was little. Ferris reconsiders helping the three, and our party of 4, now complete, sail away to the Wind Shrine. At the Wind Shrine, we learn Lena's father has entered but hasn't come back. After a short dungeon, including a series staple introductory boss battle that teaches you not to attack when the boss is defending, our team makes it to the crystal room to find it shattered. But the power of the 4 crystals around the world fly into each of our party members, blessing them with power. As Lena's father shows up briefly to say our crew has been chosen as the Warriors of Light, and we must fight against the incoming darkness. What's left of the Wind Crystal gives its power to our party, and we are granted our first jobs: Knight, Monk, Thief, White Mage, Black Mage, and the new job, Blue Mage. With our goal and powers now understood, it's time for Bartz, Lena, Galuf, and Ferris to save the world. Welcome to Final Fantasy V. Pretty action-packed intro sequence, but let's go over our jobs before we go any further. Really, I don't need to tell you what the series defaults do again. You know what a Knight or Black Mage does by now. However, it's maybe worthwhile going over their skills and stats. Knights have great strength and stamina and work as both beefy physical attackers and tanks. Their defense abilities of cover and guard can be combined to effortlessly protect low HP party members, and learning two-handed will double the damage of swords, katanas, and axes. Sadly, their later levels are just the ability to equip things other classes normally can't. Monks, as previously mentioned, have the best strength and stamina stat bonuses. Like previous monks, they have kick and focus. Barehanded, which allows other classes to be as powerful with no weapons. Chakra, which is a self-heal that removes poison and darkness. And Counter, which is a 50% counter-strike chance. Their last couple levels are just HP percentage increases, but these guys are still mastery priorities due to their stat bonuses. Thieves are a utility class that, like Monk, are held up by their best-in-class stat bonus for agility. We are familiar with Scram, Steal, and Mug, but now Thieves have other utility skills like being able to see hidden paths, preventing back attacks, and allowing you to sprint, which, funnily enough, does stack with the Pixel Remaster Sprint. Again though, you are here to master this class for its stat bonus, as well as its final skill, Artful Dodger, which has the ability you can give to any class to give them plus 16 agility buff. Black and White Mages need no introduction. Your job levels allow the ability to do up to that level of either Black or White magic, and Mastery gives you their impressive magic stat bonus. But instead of a Red Mage, we get a Blue Mage, one of the most iconic FF jobs. Blue Mages learn spells from enemies instead of purchasing them, and in FF5 they also have some minor Scholar-esque support abilities. The Blue Mage themselves needs to be hit with the move to learn it, which causes a spot of difficulty, unless you turn your entire party into Blue Mages when you know there's an ability to be had. Final Fantasy games have had a hard time balancing this class, leading it to either being buck nasty or dog shit. In this game, it's buck nasty. While their magic stat bonus is nice, it's not as good as many others, meaning that Blue Mage doesn't have as much of a mastery priority. Really, just having access to good blue magic is powerful enough. Nearby is the town of Toul, where Ferris and the boys go drinking. There's a tutorial building that can help catch you up to speed on common Final Fantasy knowledge, as well as letting us know that secret passages are back for the 3rd game in a row. To the north is an old friend of Lena's, Zoc. He oversees the Torna Canal, our way out of this zone, but he says he lost the key and there's monsters in the way. We are invited to spend the night, and Bartz wakes up partway through for a little character development. He remembers that his dad was someone who protected the crystals and didn't want his son to know about them in case something happened to him. Zoc notices Bartz during his night walk and gives him the key to the canal. It was really never lost, he just wanted to protect Lena. As the party sets sail, Lena details the severity of the situation. If all the crystals shatter, the world will slowly become uninhabitable. Galuf, Ferris, and Bartz all declare their pledge to saving the crystals as they sail forward. At Torna Canal, Bartz uses the key to open the gate, but it doesn't take long for the monster of the canal to make itself known. This is Karlabos, not the deadliest boss around, but definitely no pushover. Between being able to paralyze a member and use Tailscrew to immediately put someone into double digits, it's possible to get unlucky in this fight. With Karlabos defeated, Sildra is trapped in a whirlpool, and our boat is left to drift in the sea. The party awakens and finds themselves at the ship graveyard, a landing ground for all the ships adrift at sea. After some soaked adventuring, the gang find a spot to dry off and rest. Lena leaves to change some privacy, and the boys wonder why Ferris is hanging out in her wet duds. A bit of commotion later, Galuf loudly declares he's a woman! which I guess I noticed Ferris was getting the he-him treatment earlier on, but I think I already half knew that Ferris was a woman and half assumed she was a woman because having long purple hair in the Final Fantasy universe isn't a very male trait. Regardless, a little more adventuring gets you to the end of the dungeon where you raise a pirate ship to find land. Bartz, Lena, and Ferris become entranced by a vision of their mother and father, respectively. A young girl attempts to entrance Galuf, but thankfully, he has amnesia, so he can't remember who his granddaughter is. Oh my god, I love this. This is so fucking funny. Galuf goes upside everyone's head to snap them back, and we do battle with the Siren. This boss will switch between being alive or undead, her alive form being weaker to physical attacks, and her undead form being weaker to magic, especially Cure. Another simple gimmick for early game, and I don't think you'll find too much problem with dispatching her. Leaving the shipyard, we get to the town of Carwin, and it's bitchin' a town theme. The town locals tell you about the water crystal at Waltz, but with no access by land and no wind to make the sea travel possible, Bartz is continuously scratching his head to figure out how to make it there. One local says her husband saw a winddrake, and when you talk to him, he describes what Lena says is her father's winddrake, Hiryu. Last being seen at the North Mountain, he must be there because he's injured, and that's where the grass that can heal his wounds grows. With land and sea travel out of the question, the gang leaves to find Hiryu and travel by air. Onward to North Mountain with its also totally bitchin' theme. Not an overly long dungeon, but you need to watch out for poison bushes. Walking through them will poison your entire party. Lena will stumble upon a mithril helm belonging to her father, only to be shot with a poison arrow. This is the bounty hunter, Magisa, who was originally hunting Hiryu, but will gladly take the royal princess instead. While this boss fight starts out with just her, after a couple turns, she will summon her husband, Forza. While Magisa goes down without too much issue, Forza's a bigger, tankier threat, both surviving longer and being able to deal huge damage with his tackle ability. After the fight, our party finds Hiryu, and Lena braves her way through the poison bushes to get the dragon grass for him. Hiryu is healed, heals Lena in return, and the four of our heroes now have some wings to make it around the world. Before heading to Waltz, we can actually fly all the way back to Castle Tycoon. Lena returns home to her kingdom and says she's got to keep going on with the whole saving the world adventure, and then later that night she goes to confront Ferris about being her older sister. Somewhere between the matching pendants and the being entranced by the image of your father, it's become somewhat obvious that Lena and Ferris are related, even if Ferris isn't exactly convinced a scallywag like herself is a princess. That's cool. Glad you guys got that sorted out. I came here for the loot. Over to Waltz, where we have the castle where we can get our story done, and the town where we can get our shopping done. Anyways, talk to the King of Waltz about maybe not amplifying the water crystal. See, Waltz is overclocking the crystal to give its kingdom that good quality of life, and Lena is worried about the water crystal shattering. The king has heard that the wind crystal shattered, but he's got no reason to believe anything's going to happen to the water crystal. So, of course, a meteorite crashes to the land right near the tower that holds the water crystal. You were really asking for that one, buddy. Oh shit, yeah, that's a meteorite. Oh shit, looks like the pacifistic beast Garula went bananas. Oh shit, looks like everyone's getting their ass handed to them. At the crystal chamber, we see a knight in red try and stop Garula, mentioning that it's under control. He gets knocked away and we take on the beast. Garula is a beefy boy who will counter physical strikes, but I was somewhat able to cheese him by combining silence with the Blue Mage's Pond Chorus, turning Garula into a froggy for most of the battle and winning pretty easily. However, it seems we were too late, which I'll be honest, I don't get, because the meteorite crashing and Garula being controlled and the crystal shattering are not entirely related in a way that makes sense to me, but maybe I'm stupid. The knight in red, with little energy left, calls Galuf by the name Lord and says to defend the fire crystal. Looks like Bart might be the only person in this group who isn't royalty. Regardless, you pick up the shards and you get your new jobs: Time Mage, Berserker, Red Mage, Summoner, and Mystic Knight. Funnily enough, there is one extra shard that we cannot reach, nor shall we, as the tower and peninsula begin to crumble. The party is dumped into the sea, where Sildra makes their triumphant return to gobble everyone up and spit them out ashore. Sadly, this was the last of Sildra's energy, and the creature returns to the sea for their final resting place. Anyways, let's talk new jobs. Red Mages are back now, and they have only 3 levels of red magic skills and also crappy stat bonuses. But this time around, the Red Mages have a huge ace up their sleeve. Their final mastery level skill is Dual Cast. This ability allows the casting of 2 spells back to back, and yes, that is just as busted as it sounds. There is a reason the Red Mage has the highest APB cost for mastery, and it is because this job is hiding Dual Cast at the end. Time Mage is a newcomer job who controls very powerful offensive and defensive buffs like haste and slow. They also get some less reliable offensive magic like the random valued comet or meteor, or the fractal valued gravity. Their mastery is the ability to equip rods, so you'll probably stick to these guys for their magic skills. Summoners are back again, and they work as you remember. Skill level dictates what level of summon magic other classes can use. Their mastery skill is Call, a random summon with no MP cost. Kinda gimmicky, but it's the side plate to the real reason you master them, their best in class magic stat bonus. Berserker is another new class, a physical powerhouse who is permanently under the Berserk status effect, giving them a 50% bonus to physical attacks and making them immune to confuse, but otherwise literally uncontrollable. Berserkers are a unique class because they only have 2 levels and the APB requirement for mastery is the lowest in the game. They have very good, but not the best, strength and stamina stat bonuses, but because it's so easy to master them, it's probably worth going for. Finally, we get another newcomer, the Mystic Knights. Mystic Knights have a good set of stat bonuses, which includes the second best agility stat. Their first level skill is Magic Shell, automatically casting shell on themselves when in critical health. All other levels are what we are really here for, Spellblade. Mystic Knights can put the affinity of offensive magic on their attacks, either ratcheting up the damage if it hits an elemental weakness, basically guaranteeing a status effect goes off, or in some cases just outright killing an enemy. Spellblade is a crucial combo piece for some of the absolutely vile endgame mixtures. Back to the plot. The King of Waltz has to eat crow for being dead fucking wrong and tells us to make sure Karnak doesn't make the same mistake with their fire crystal because they are also using an amplification machine. Is this a Ghibli movie? It feels like an environmental Ghibli movie. It turns out the meteorite has a warper inside, and that takes you to a meteorite that dropped near Karnak. Alas, this meteorite association and werewolf association immediately gets you thrown in the clink once you get into town. Once in the slammer, some old geezer blasts your cell Count of Monte Cristo style. This is Professor Sid, the man who invented the crystal amplification machines. He's regretting what has happened, knows that the wind and water crystal shattered, and was thrown in jail for trying to shut off the machine. You all get busted out because the fire crystal cracked, spat fireballs everywhere, and Sid needs your help to fix the situation at the fire-powered ship. Also, the werewolf is trying to enter the castle. I don't know what's up with this guy yet. Wow, things are really heating up here in Karnak. Too bad I'm going back to Waltz to do an optional boss fight. Hidden in the castle is Shiva, an optional summon, who was a pushover because I had access to Fyra and Fyra Spellblade, so I wrecked house without a second thought. Back in the Karnak area, we hop on the fire-powered ship. Sid explains that the engine to this bad boy has been sucking up all the power of the fire crystal, and we gotta shut it down. Let's do a little house cleaning. Right now, Bartz is a Mystic Knight who does insane damage because I can both Spellblade and I have the Knight's two-handed. Lena is a Time Mage with level 3 White Magic. Galuf is similarly a Summoner with level 3 Black Magic. And Ferris is in for the long haul as a Red Mage with Blue Magic. Also, the fire-powered ship is a long-ass dungeon because it's very easy to get turned around and confused as to where you are going. No area more so than when you hit the conveyor slip and slide and fire out somewhere. It took some time and grind to get all the chests before I was ready to move on, but this is Final Fantasy V, so I'm not mad about getting some extra APB for my jobs. Inside the engine room, we find the Queen of Karnak, who I guess was missing, about to blow this place up. We do battle with the Liquid Flame, a real pain of a boss. Not because he was hard, but because I was kind of too good at kicking his ass. So, the Liquid Flame has 3 forms, Humanoid, Hand, and Tornado. 2 of these forms have an obvious weakness to ice. I got 2 people with Blizzara, Galuf has the Shiva summon, Lena uses an Ice Rod, and Bartz has Blizzara Spellblade. The problem is the Hand. The Hand actually has elemental immunities, including ice. Because my offense was so elementally charged, I was having a hard time getting the Liquid Flame off of the Hand form because I didn't realize I needed to strike him with something non-elemental. Eventually, I had Ferris Physical Attack or Galef Chocobo Summon, but for a while, I was banging my head against the wall because I was too iced out to touch the guy. Outside of the hand form, I blew the fucking doors off him. The Queen recovers to tell us that she was under the control of some evil presence that wants to plunge the world into darkness. Yawn is the 5th game, we know how this goes. In the Crystal Room, that werewolf shows up again, seemingly fighting on our side and also seemingly recognizing Galef. Before we can get anywhere, another evil-controlled soldier throws a switch, amplifies the crystal, and shatters it. The crystal was holding this whole place together, so now we got a problem. We gotta get out of here before this sucker blows up. I guess the fire-powered ship was somehow connected to the castle because we have to escape out from the prison area within 10 minutes. That part isn't hard. What's hard is making sure you score all the loot before you escape. Most treasure chests are monster-rigged, and the fights within are not difficult, but they are a time tax. There's a whopping 15 of these fuckers in the castle, and some of the really hidden ones have good shit worth collecting. Not to mention, these fights give great APB as well. I was cutting it a little close, but I was doing okay until the very exit, where a sub-boss shows up and starts talking. Fucking, oh my god, shut up, I'm nearly out of time. I refuse to lose like this because your ass is hitting me with unskippable dialogue. Holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck! Whew! Jesus Christ. Thankfully, the crystal shards make it out, and we got our next 3 jobs. First up is the new Beastmaster job. While the stat lines are honestly kinda dog water, this job is based around whips, which can be used from the back row to help offset those crappy stats. Beastmasters can Calm, which is a stop spell for non-human, non-mechanical enemies, Control, which takes over a monster and is vital for blue magic farming, and Capture, which captures a monster and then allows you to release them for big damage or possibly a unique effect. Due to the awful stats and Control being a level 2 skill, Mastery is not needed for these guys. Geomancer is back from FF3, and while they were a favorite of mine in that game, they are significantly weaker now. Random terrain-based spells with no MP costs just isn't as in vogue in FF5, so they become like Berserkers, where it's a low-cost mastery class with some cool support bennies. In this case, they get the ability to see traps and walk over hazardous terrain. Yeah, that's not gonna rock the world, but 100 APB to mastery, come on. Finally, Ninja is back after saving us from the Crystal Tower. Maybe a little underwhelming at first blush, as the stat line is good and skills like Smoke Bomb, Escapes, or Illusion Dummies aren't gonna blow anyone's socks off. Of course, they can still throw weapons, but what makes ninjas nuck if you buck fucking wild is their mastery skill of Dual Wield. This allows for equipping 2 separate weapons and getting 2 attacks, including any special abilities the weapons may have. When you pair this with the insane weapons out there, as well as other abilities, it starts getting dirty real quick. Back on track, we gotta go visit where Sid works out and hit up the Library of Ancients. Inside, we find his grandson. Oh my god. No way. His grandson's name is Mid. Holy shit, that aged like milk. You have to be fucking kidding me. Anyways, Mid is somewhere deep in the library and we gotta go find him. Also, I gotta find time to grind because there's a lot of blue magic down here and I would like my Beastmaster to have control to make getting all of it easier. The enemies in this area have a gimmick where you only ever encounter one, but they will cycle between each other during battle, sometimes changing up who you are fighting against, and sometimes making it a pain in the ass for the correct motherfucker with the blue magic to show up. There's also a sub-boss battle with Ifrit, who you get as a summon after boxing up with Bizarre Spellblade. I am really seeing the power of Spellblade, y'all. Is that Mid? God, they were not fucking around when they said that FF5 is the funny one. Before we get to Mid, we have Byblos as a boss battle. He's weak to fire, so I smoke him in record time. Mid was so engrossed in his book that he didn't hear the boss battle, nor is aware that the basement has been overrun with monsters, making him a certified fucking nerd. He departs to be with his grandpa Sid as he learns how to get the fire-powered ship back up and working again. While Sid and Mid are working on the ship, Galef starts to get some of his memory back. That blonde girl from 4 is his granddaughter, Krylie, which I assume is pronounced Krylie, but it would be so much funnier if it was Krill.
Not me, Bill. There's only one of me in all the world. I am one in a trillion. Post-Production J here. In an effort to find out exactly what the pronunciation of her name could be, I looked it up in Japanese. Her name is written in katakana, and it translates to Kururu, which doesn't help me get any closer to figuring out a pronunciation, so we're sticking with Krylie.
Not only that, but Galuf is not from this world. He is originally from another world that came to this one to defeat the great evil X-Death. X-Death, which, if memory serves, is an amazing translation of Exodus, is the warlock that has been affecting the game so far, looking to plunge Bartz's world into darkness. Galuf rode into this world off the back of one of those meteorites because even though in his world him and the warriors were able to seal away X-Death, he now threatens to reawaken here. Sailing around, we can visit Jakol and do some shopping, as well as grab a bit of loot from the Jakol cave. Further north is iStory, an Apple store turned into a town, I guess, where we can fight Ramu nearby for his summon. Sailing southeast is Crescent, where we can... oh, fuck. Looks like that's the end of our ship. Thankfully, to the south of Crescent is a chocobo forest, where Bartz finds a black chocobo. For some reason, this little guy can't get up in the air. Oh, it seems that our other two jobs were stuck in his belly. Away we go. Bards are back, and just like we last left them, rather piddling in insignificance. They obviously still have Sing, which gives them a utility as a support job, but they can also hide, like the Spoony Bard from FF4. Like other kinda worthless classes, their mastery requirement is exceptionally low, so you don't have to invest very much to get their skills. Rangers also return, but under the rules of Final Fantasy V become much more powerful. While they are still back row attackers who can aim to increase accuracy and get the aid of woodland animals, their signature skill of Rapid Fire is a highly abusable ability when combined with other powerhouses like Spellblade. Their stats are simply okay. They have no innate support skills to learn when mastered, but their APB requirement is on the low end, making this a class you want to grind out for that sweet, sweet Rapid Fire. If you have the time, we can visit Lix, Bartz's hometown. Here we get some flashbacks, including the passing of his mother, Stella. Flying back to the Library of Ancients, Sid and Mid tell us about seeing King Tycoon traverse the desert of shifting sands. One problem: nobody knows how. When the party gets to the sands, they're kind of walled off, until Sid and Mid show up with this banger of an idea. Get a sandworm to attack you, kill it, and use its dead body as a bridge. All the time in the library, and that's what you came up with? The sandworm fight has a gimmick where it comes out of one of three holes. The problem is, if you attack any of the empty holes, and this includes multi-targeting magics, the hole will cast gravity on you in return. As long as you don't mess this up, this isn't that hard, because my team is currently shitting damage. After a little bit of sandy slip and slide through the desert, the party lands at Gone, the city of ruin. Ha ha. Where the king looks to be sneaking around the outskirts. When you confront him, Lena and Ferris both awkwardly call him daddy. You get bamboozled again. Lena and Ferris admit that they are sisters. Galuf overhears Bartz's decision to go on without him, and rightfully gets kinda huffy about it. It seems the gang has fallen into some ancient mechanical lair, complete with a teleporter that warps them all the way back to Crescent and kinda blows up after doing so. Oh look, the Black Chocobo brought Sid and Mid back to Crescent too. I wonder what this button does. We find the fire-powered ship, not destroyed, and a new airship. It seems that this is a lair built by the Ancients. We've heard rumblings before about an advanced past civilization, but this is the first time we've actually encountered something concrete from them. Sid raises the old airship, but once in the sky we realize we have an interloper hanging on. I waste him in like 2 turns because I think he's weak to lightning and Bartz has a lightning bow. Sid and Mid will stay behind in the lair as our party takes to the skies to find the Earth Crystal and protect it before X-Death finds a way to shatter it. Going back to Gone, we see a gigantic mecha tower rise from the ground. Back at base, Sid tells us that this was the ancient work of the Ronkans. How do I pronounce this? Ronkans. Oh god, I'm too Midwestern. Ronkins. Who amplified the Earth Crystal to make their kingdom float. They stopped doing this once they realized it was harming the crystal, but someone, cough cough, turned the machine back on. The mecha tower is too high for our airship, so Sid says we need adamantite to upgrade our flight capabilities. Galuf, who has a stellar track record for memory so far, says he remembers there being some in the meteorite he crashed in. He's actually right. So that was easy, but nothing in this game happens for free, as we are attacked by an adamantoise. Outside of the fact that he kind of hits like a truck and you need to keep your heels up, this guy goes down without much of a bother. Sick! The airship is upgraded. Mid warns us about the defense system the Ronka Ruins has. This shows up in the form of multiple battles against flamethrowers and missile launchers. The flamethrowers are kinda no biggie, but the missile launchers can both chunk huge damage and confuse party members. Taking down 2 sets of each allows you to take on the final gun, the Soul Cannon. This boss fight is much more difficult. It's similar to sprint boss fights, as the cannon takes many turns to charge up its attack, but it's not an instant KO if it does. However, it does have 2 little launchers that can make the fight annoying enough to actually wipe on it, which I did. Since this is a battle of speed, I came back with my time mage and out-hustled the thing, putting it in the ground. Our reward is one hell of a dungeon. The Ronka Ruins are big and confusing. This is a worthwhile time to have see pathways as an ability, or just use a thief, because so much of the flooring is hidden. It's also time to put some Beastmaster control to use, because the blue magic you get from this area is insane. Both White Wind and 1000 Needles are total must-have spells, and once you see what they do, you will agree. Honestly, I like this dungeon a lot. It was time for something with the perfect difficulty to chew on. At the end, you find King Tycoon, telling the girls to make themselves useful and take out this boss who changes attributes. This is Archaeoavis, and change attributes it does. Over certain damage thresholds, Archaeoavis will change up its immunities, but it doesn't have a tell that this is happening, so you have to suss out what's going on. Likely, the giveaway is when something elemental ends up healing it for nearly a fucking 1,000 health. It will at one point look as though it's defeated, but it pops back up for one final stand where it's immune to all elemental attacks. It's a difficult boss fight just because it's so hard to stay on your feet with everything changing behind the scenes, but eventually you wax him and get access to the Earth Crystal. You will never guess this, but King Tycoon was under an evil spell. Wow, no way! But before he can take out the party, another meteorite drops to the ground. Busting out from the wall, she's one in a Krillian, it's Krylie! She zaps the king, snaps him back to his senses, but it's too late because the Earth Crystal shatters. Of course it does! Exdeath is properly released and makes himself known. And then, the king does something with the crystal shards, but it's not really apparent what. I thought he was trying to keep the ruins floating, but since they're about to fall anyways, maybe it wasn't that. You get your new jobs, mourn the loss of the king, and hightail it out of there before everything collapses. Galuf and Krylie declare that they are going back to their world. They had Exdeath sealed on this world, but it looks like he's gone back to theirs. The meteorite Krylie rode in on only has enough juice for one last return trip, so Galuf forbids the rest of the party from following him. As Galuf and Krylie ride off into the sky, we are left with a party of 3 and our final 4 jobs. Dragoons return and are mostly the same. Their stat bonuses are okay, but they do take a hit on magic. This job is all about jump, being easily learned at the first level, and not a whole lot else going on other than a crappy Osmos drain. As one may expect, it doesn't take much APB to master them. Dancer is a very strange class. A physical fighter who is quite weak and can only flirt, which is a charm, and dance, which is like a random bard song, but the options are only confusion, HP drain, MP drain, and an attack that does 4 times damage. Here's where things get interesting. The Dancer has 4 mostly unique pieces of equipment: the Man-Eater knife, the red slippers, the Lamia's tiara, and the ribbon. The Man-Eater is the best knife in the game. The ribbon is the classic Final Fantasy all-status negating accessory, but only Dancers can wear them now. And the slippers, the tiara, and the ribbon all give the Dancer immunity to confusion, an increased chance for flirt to work, and an increased chance to get the 4 times damage spell happen when you dance. This makes them the most specialized job in the game, because you have to build them this way to get the most out of what they offer. Otherwise, they're kind of piddling and only worth mastering to give your freelancer the ability to wear ribbons. Samurai are an alternative heavy hitter job, being the only ones who can use katanas. They can attack and stun while ignoring the special effects of their weapon and also not dispelling special effects on the enemy like sleep. Spend gills do a fixed amount of damage, and spend 2 turns to have a chance to instant-kill all normal enemies in the battle. However, maybe the best ability they have is a support ability that increases their chance to dodge physical attacks by 25%. Because this is an innate ability to the samurai, mastery causes this ability to become innate to your freelancer, making the samurai a worthy mastery target. Finally, we have the chemist. This is an alternative healer class that doubles the potency of healing items. They can also drink battle potions to pump stats, cure most ailments, and revive KO'd party members. The prize ability of the chemist is Mix, combining items to make more powerful healing, status-changing, or damage-dealing effects. The chemist is not meant to be mastered. Their stat line is awful, and Mix is only a level 2 skill. It's very easy to take a vacation on chemist just to get Mix and then have access to one of the most useful abilities in the game on any build. Okay, we weren't going to let Galuf and Kyrie just head home by themselves like that, right? By finding Sid in mid, they figured out that the adamantite seems to be charging up the meteorites. With the juice of all the ones left, our team may be able to warp to Galuf's world and help him defeat Exdeath. As always, nothing is free, so we have boss battles at each of the 3 meteorites. None of these encounters are all that grueling, but being down 1 party member does make for a different flavor of difficulty. You will get Titan as a summon when you're done, which is a nice added benefit. After all 3 bosses are smoked, Sid shows us that the meteorites are quadrangulating. Is that a word? On 1 point. Bartz, Lena, and Ferris say what could be their last goodbyes to their homeworld and jump into the portal, landing in Galuf's world. The team turns in for the night as Lena and Ferris talk. However, they are run up on by monsters and both captured. Bartz is able to defeat his assailant solo, but he's done in by a fucking fart box. Way to go, kiddo. Exdeath has captured the 3 of them, and Disney Magic Mirror broadcasts the information to Galuf and his forces, telling them to stand down on their assault on the big bridge. Hey, I've heard there's a really good song about that in this game. As Exdeath leaves, he instructs Gilgamesh to watch over the captives. Galuf takes Krylee's Drake and goes on a solo infiltration. He does one-on-one battle with Gilgamesh, beats the goofy out of him. Oh man, I see why people like this guy. And gets the old band back together. Escaping across the big bridge, we get the iconic song as our gang fights wave after wave of enemies. Eventually, at the halfway point, Gilgamesh is waiting for us. He isn't too tough, until he realizes he's kind of getting his ass taken off and handed back to him, in which case he hastes, protects, and shells, and the fight becomes much harder as he will start jumping like a dragoon as well. In the end, you do not beat him as he runs away because he forgot his grandma was on fire or something. Making it to the end of the bridge, a gigantic barrier is put up around Castle Exdeath, and the power of it fucking flings our heroes to God knows where in the countryside. Nearby is the frontier town of Regol, where we can do some actual shopping for the first time in a while. There's a lot of new weapons and spells to be had, so it's time to empty the pockets. Later that night at the inn, Galuf exits and Bartz chases after him, finding out that he's drinking at the old pub. Bartz apologizes for butting and ruining Galuf's march on Castle Exdeath, and Galuf explains that if anything, it probably saved his forces because they had no idea that barrier was ready to go off. Bartz and his crew possibly risked never returning home to help Galuf, and Galuf is deeply appreciative that they came to his world. Exploring to the south, we find Kuza, the Sealed Kingdom, home of the legendary 12 ancient weapons. While they are all sealed right now, I get the feeling we're going to come back for them. Also, as you exit, watch out for this shield dragon. I actually wiped to this multiple times because he has auto reflect, massive damage, and approximately 8 billion health. I had to look up how to beat him because I couldn't escape, and I found that you need to control him and have him blaze himself 4 times. Jesus Christ, what a random kick in the ass. Traveling through this little forest patch, we find a Moogle. Oh no, he's stupid. Well, thankfully he's cute and fluffy, and we are going to save him. Just have to get through this fucking random battle slip and slide dungeon. At the end, he's being threatened by a Tyrannosaur. Fuck this boss. He will counter any spells with poison breath and counter any attacks with his own physical attack. I think the intended strategy is to cheese him out with a Phoenix down, because otherwise, It's nearly impossible to trade against his poison breath counters. After saving the little guy, Lena does her best impression of my wife finding yet another cat in the wild and gets the Moogle to safety. In thanks, he shows us where he wants us to go. Bruh? Where the fuck are you going, son? In the most roundabout way possible, he's leading you to the Moogle village, where you are recognized as the person who saved him and rewarded handsomely. Not only that, but the Moogle phones home to the Moogle at Criley's side to let her know that the party has been found. See, I guess Moogles can communicate telepathically. That's cool. Anyways, the Windrake is still wiped out from the march on Castle Exdeath, but he says, and I guess Criley can just talk to animals, that he's got one more flight in him. Criley and the Drake fly to the village, scoop the party, and take them back to Galif's kingdom of Ball. On the throne, Galif is debriefed that the situation hasn't gotten any better. Bartz is kind of gobsmacked that Galif is a king, and really it is funny that now Bartz is the only person in the team who's not royalty. Going upstairs to check on the Drake, Criley says that he pushed himself too far and is now dying. Much like the early quest towards the beginning of the game, the only way to heal the Drake is going to be the Dragon Grass, which Galif surmises is at Drakenvale, the home of the Windrakes, which is north past the werewolf town of Quelb. Off we go! Entering Quelb, it should be smooth sailing if the gate is up. It isn't. We visit Galif's old friend Kelger to open it and are instead attacked. Kelger knows not if we are friend or foe and engages Bart in Chuny Naruto battle. He takes a couple licks, but in the end he whomps the old dog into the next room. Kelger is impressed, and when Bart says it was just a trick his dad Dorgan taught him, Galif and Kelger reel back in shock, because Dorgan was one of the original Dawn Warriors who sealed away Exdeath. Flashing back, we see that the Dawn Warriors chased Exdeath into Bartz's world, but were unable to bring him back, sealing him there in fear they wouldn't get another chance. This weighed greatly on Dorgan, who decided to stay in Bartz's world to watch over the seal instead of return home to his own world. Knowing that this is the son of his old war buddy, Kelger raises the gate, no questions asked. Up the mountain we go. The hike up Drakenvale is tough thanks to multiple forms of undead / poison dragon things. There's even a battle where you have to save a golem from one of each attacking him. Successfully doing so gets you the golem as a summoned. This mountain is a bit of a trek, so let's do another round of house cleaning on my team. Right now, Bartz is a ranger because I'm gunning for that rapid fire mastery. It's a little rough just having him as a ranger, but I think it's going to pay off in the long run because I plan on pairing him with Spellblade or possibly dual wield. I think either way is going to be a winner. Lena has completely changed direction. Originally being a white and time mage, I have started to grind monk on her, and I think she's going to land somewhere as a monk time mage combo. Being both a huge physical powerhouse and being the person who hastes people, namely herself, has been one of the most engaging combinations I've had yet. Galif is on his way to mastering Summoner, while also having a great base of high-level magic and enough levels in Beastmaster to be the person who helps out with Blue Mage grinding, as well as Beastmaster just kind of being better than I thought. I might focus on Beastmaster more, we'll see. Ferris was the character who I was the most excited for and the character I'm the most disappointed by so far. Blue Magic has been good, but it's very expensive compared to traditional magic, with not always the best power behind it. And the long grind to Red Mage's dual cast has had Ferris feeling quite stunted. Hopefully, once I can get there, I can spin Ferris off into something that really makes that dual cast price worth it. I want someone to have Mix. I'm not sure who yet though. In a clearing, our party thinks we have found the dragon grass, but instead it is a dangerous dragon pod. At least, I assume it's dangerous. I went with a ballsy play of having Ferris try for a death claw, and it fucking worked. This brought the boss down to single digits and I wiped it out with one more attack. Maybe I was being too hard on Ferris. Her ears must have been burning. On the way out back, I decide to focus on Galif as a Beastmaster, which means I captured a Cornago, paid 10 large to a wizard in the well, and got a Cornago Gourd, which allows me to capture monsters at half health instead of roughly 12%. I think I like where this is going. Back at Castle Ball, we have to hop in through the moat because the doors are shut. Criley is in her bed either really sick or sleeping. Either way, she is channeling the information of a 700-year-old sage named Guido, and we could probably use his help later. The Windrake is too weak and weary to actually eat the green, so Lena has to mama bird the greens to him. But the greens are poisonous, so we are, once again, watching Lena poison herself to save a drake. Take those scenarios off the clothesline and wear them again if they're clean, I guess. Thankfully, Krylie is done being sick/sleeping/channeling a brand new NPC, so she rolls in to give Lena an antidote. The Windrake is healed, everyone is cool, Krylie is maybe still sick or sleepy, whatever. We can go find Sage Guido now. Flying over to Guido's little island, we find that it is immediately crumbling into the sea. Somehow, X-Death turns to the camera and takes credit for this. Okay, new plan. Just a little west of here is Zezat's castle, one of the original Dawn warriors. He's out leading a fleet against X-Death at the moment, but we are warmly welcomed in. We can rest and whatnot and then fly out to meet him on the battle lines as his seafaring attack on the castle will begin shortly. The party is woken up to find that instead of Zezat's fleet under attack, it is X-Death's forces going on the offensive. We run around the ship, clearing out some minor baddies before we meet a familiar face. If the song didn't give it away, it's time to do battle with silly old Gilgamesh again. He's no clown, but this time he will summon his partner Enkidu to assist him in the fight. Enkidu is a pain in the ass, as he will heal Gilgamesh when he arrives, heal Gilgamesh during battle, and possibly snipe a whole ass character thanks to his vampire drain. So yeah, this guy's gotta go. After another great battle, Gilgamesh attempts to tactically retreat and leave Enkidu to clean up. One problem. Okay, plan B. Gilgamesh tries to jump in the ocean and take us with him. He fucks that up too. I love this guy. After the attack, we join Zezat as he shows us that the fleet ruse was just a distraction. He has hidden away a submarine for us to approach the barrier tower, blow our way into, and take out from the inside. Zezat is going to the basement to kill the generator, and we are going to the top to kill the antenna. So it's time for a multi-floor dungeon. Truthfully, the barrier tower isn't that long because all the rooms are on the smaller side, but there are some big boy encounters. Ziggurat Gigases are no joke. Reflect warriors come pre-installed with Reflect, and there are 2 treasure chests that hide the Yellow Dragon and Red Dragon respectively. These fights are hard, but so worth it, especially for the Yellow Dragon fight because you get the gold hairpin, a piece of headgear that halves MP usage and makes Ferris no longer gun-shy about her better blue magics. At the top we find the antenna, radio down to Zezat to blow the generator, and find ourselves in a boss fight. Atmos is a really wicked encounter. Basically, he throws out a bunch of comets until some party members are dead, and then slowly drags the bodies towards him. I don't know what happens if they get too close, and I wasn't willing to find out. So, I tried a couple different attempts to stop him, and when things got out of hand, I used Lena's return to restart the fight. Eventually, I put Atmos to sleep, and this in effect won me the battle. As long as I didn't physically attack him, he wasn't waking up, so Bart sat on the sidelines while the other 3 dumped their most powerful spells until Atmos died. With the antenna defeated, Zezat attempts to leave the generator room, but the energy starts to recursively loop and traps him inside. In what feels like a Final Fantasy IV-ass move, Zezat knew he was probably heading to his death, but he would rather it be him than one of the new Warriors of Light. Galuf is understandably despondent about losing his old war buddy and fellow Dawn warrior, but the plan worked out in the end. The barrier tower falls and the barrier around Castle X-Death dissipates. Now, I would expect that we would charge the castle or something, but the girls mentioned that we can use the submarine to access Guido's sunken cave, a thing I just learned about this second. Also with the submarine, we get a new town to shop at. Go spend that money. I also found a sunken cave with some unbelievable enemies to grind APB for. I stayed here for a minute to try and put some dents in my path to mastery. In the forest after the cave, you can find the Cobblepass, a difficult sub-boss that can petrify party members as the form of a counter. However, upon defeat, you get Cobblepass as a summon. Back underwater, we find Guido's sunken cavern. Oh yay, it's a small dungeon, my favorite. Get ready to fight 30 of these tanky old fucks on repeat. At the end, Bart finds a turtle, and like any doorknob-licking 5-year-old, roughhouses it because it seems fun. This is the great Sage Guido, and he would like it if you fucking stopped. He tells the party that Exdeath is off to the Great Forest of Moor, as not only are these trees sentient beings of magic, but it's actually the birthplace of Exdeath himself. A magical tree within was used to seal evil, but 500 years ago it absorbed so much malevolence that it became Exdeath. Guido does not know exactly what Exdeath wants in the forest, but regardless, we should try to beat him to the punch. The Great Forest of Moor is confusing, the pathing is tight, and it's not entirely obvious what you can walk around. To get to the other areas, you have to interact with these tree holes, and finding them is a pain because you can only see so far around you. The encounters here are pretty fluffy, but it's more of an annoyance in consistently trying to remember your bearings as you figure out where to go. After enough bumbling around, Exdeath says fuck this whole idea and firebombs the forest. Thankfully, a random underground Moogle pulls your team to safety, and when you come back up, the joint is totally torched over. At the end of the forest, you find the Guardian Tree, the sacred tree that sealed evil and, I think, also birthed Exdeath. Inside are 4 crystal-like shapes that attack you. This boss fight is a bit tricky. Each of these crystals will absorb an element, either fire, water, earth, or wind. Now where have we seen those before? While their attacks are frequent, they aren't overpowering at first, meaning I had time to haste everyone, put up a golem shield, and start taking down crystals kinda sorta one at a time. Here's where it gets tricky. Once they take enough damage, they then come swinging with big elemental spells, so you have to be mindful of your health as well. It's a war of attrition that I won, and my reward was Exdeath thanking me. Oh, fuck, what did I do? Yeah, so those are the dead-ass crystals of the world, and I destroyed them. Fuck if I know why they attacked me, but now Exdeath is running wild, zaps all of our party, and looks to rule the day. Criley, through familial senses, can tell Galuf is at the Great Forest and getting his ass beat. So she shows up, sucker punches Exdeath, weirdly declares that it's not going to be an issue anymore, like she's confident in this, gets scooped up in a flame wheel, and now all 5 of us look like we're fucked. Galuf, former Dawn Warrior and current Warrior of Light, begins to push back against the crystal's power, breaking Criley out of her spell prison and destroying the crystal in rebellion. Exdeath and Galuf do cutscene battle, where Exdeath should kill Galuf in one attack, but the man will not go down. Exdeath becomes more and more concerned. Why isn't he dying? He throws flare, holy, even meteor, but nothing will stop the old man. Eventually, in the face of such power, Exdeath is defeated / retreats and takes the remaining crystals with him. The party rallies to Galuf's side, but it's too late. No amount of cures, raises, phoenix downs, or elixirs bring him back. Galuf's valiant flame has finally gone out. Criley, understandably, is going through it, but the Guardian Tree allows Galuf to briefly speak with her, telling her to join the fight against Exdeath and giving her all of his abilities, so all that grinding wasn't wasted. We lose Galuf, but gain Criley, and we move towards Castle Exdeath to get payback. But before we go, I should mention the Gill Cave, an optional dungeon with loads of money, that I am not doing because you could run into the Gill Turtle boss, and this thing is like an Omega level optional boss that I am just not prepared to fuck around and find out with. The cave is normally fine, but there's a hidden path where every step you earn double the money of the step before, but you have a chance at fighting the turtle, and there's just no world where I can fight this dude, so adios, my guy. Anyways, fuck all of that. Castle Exdeath. Let's do it. This castle has multiple floors of some bad motherfuckers. Encounters are tough, but rewarding as APB starts dropping big time from these fights. We also see the red and yellow dragons again as regular encounters. Early into the climb, the party is stopped by an illusory wall, so Criley somewhat telepathically gets the help of Kelger to break the castle's illusion. Jesus Christ! This place is vile looking! Also, Kelger, being the last remaining Dawn Warrior, knows that he has to go to the Great Beyond for this one, thus ending the tale of all the original Dawn Warriors. Also, it's time for some housekeeping. Criley mastered Summoner, and Bart's mastered Ranger, meaning it's time to switch them up. At this point, I need to be pretty confident on where I'm going, so Bart's is going to meld Ranger, Ninja, and Spellblade to hopefully become a dual-wielding freak with spell attacks that go off multiple times. Lena is going to stick with the base of Monk and White and Time magic abilities. Krylie is the outlier right now as she has Summoner mastered. I'd like her to learn Mix, and then from there I'm not entirely sure. Krylie has been rocking the Dancing Dagger for a minute, which has a good chance of her casting Dance instead of attacking, and I think I like that utility, so I'll probably keep that on her. It's not like having a normal attack is of much use for her in that capacity. Ferris is still in for the long haul, going to be a dual cast Red Mage Blue Mage combo. Unfortunately, after getting dual cast, I learned it does not work with blue magic. So I'm going to run Ferris through Black Mage real quick to get access to the big damage. I spent a fair amount of time grinding here because the APB game was great, and I needed someone to be level 36 so I could get the blue magic level 3 flare. It only works on people whose level is divisible by 3. Honestly, I was in this dungeon for ages. Even after I stopped grinding, it was still a fight to get through all the floors, get past these floor trap puzzles, and do all the optional stuff like getting the Carbuncle boss fight. This dude is fucking wild. He has float and reflect attached, so you can't hit him with Titan or magic. Let's talk about Spellblade though. Honestly, I think Spellblade is a little underwhelming. It takes a turn to apply it, and then it mostly doesn't add to your damage. It just stacks an effect or a multiplier for elemental weakness. This kind of makes it worthless in regular battles because the setup is too long and you need to know what the critical weaknesses are. But for fights like this, it's game breaking because you can Spellblade Silence and then attack Carbuncle, getting around their reflect and silencing them. This makes him useless, but you need to keep attacking to make sure the silence doesn't wear off. To help speed up the fight, I hit Lena with her own reflect and then started reflect bouncing spells off of her because you cannot reflect a spell that's already been reflected. Thank you Final Fantasy IV for teaching me that. Krylie didn't make it to the end of the fight, but I got Carbuncle as a summon, which is crazy powerful because it casts reflect on the whole party. That's fucking nasty. Towards the top of the castle, we open an empty chest. Odd. And then find out our old buddy Gilgamesh already took the treasure. Yeah, it's time for another battle with the boy. Now, for most Gilgamesh encounters, he's a chatty fellow, but this one more so than usual. The fight itself is great. He's powerful, but never overwhelming. But his variety of non-spell status effect skills make for a fight where you're playing equal offense and defense. During the scuffle, he remarks that the spry older fellow is missing, and Krylie tells him that Galuf fell to X-Death. Gilgamesh honestly seems a bit downtrodden by this. Eventually, he decides it's morphing time and evolves into a bigger, badder Gilgamesh, complete with the mother of all weapons, which does almost nothing. He's like, what the fuck? Isn't this sword supposed to be the mightiest of all? Eventually, X-Death gets a little bit fucking tired of Gilgamesh's goober behavior and banishes him to the void for the crimes of being silly. After the fight, we find the problem. He was wielding Excalibur, not Excalibur. Classic issue. Finally, we square off with X-Death. He explains that he plans to use the crystals to return Earth to normal. We explain that we plan on returning his ass to the great beyond. This is a great fight. Much like Gilgamesh, you have to play offense and defense in equal measure. X-Death has a lot of status effects he can use, and if you try to slow him, he will automatically haste it away. His most annoying trait is dispelling whatever buffs your characters have, which in this fight could be a constant supply of haste, reflect from Carbuncle, and Earthen Wall from Golem. Thankfully, a lot of his damage dealing comes from elemental spells, so if you can keep Carbuncle's reflect up, you can mitigate a lot of the hurt. Also, X-Death is live for level 3 Flare, which does 3,000 each time, making it one of your best spells. With enough grit and determination, you defeat X-Death. Lena maybe doesn't survive, the crystals explode, and the world seems normal. When the party wakes up, they see Castle Tycoon. Lena and Ferris return home to be princesses, including Ferris being all dolled up for once. But Krylie can't really party just yet. She still feels an anxiety about the passing of Galuf. Bart's, I don't know, man. I guess his way of helping her get over that is introducing her to Boko, who has gotten married with kids on the way, and go adventuring again. If you, for whatever reason is completely beyond me, visit a little area over by Tool, you'll fall into an antlion cave and do battle. It's mainly just annoying because the antlion casts Discord over and over to make you lose levels and then eventually flees. Ferris busts you out of the cave after some teasing and says that she's unsurprisingly not fit for the life of a princess. Together, you fucking continue adventuring aimlessly. Also, Criley has a splinter. This is plot critical. A little further on, you find Guido's cave, which makes no sense because Guido was from Criley's world and not Bartz's. Guido explains that Exdeath was successful in what he said he was planning on doing, returning the Earth to normal. See, 1,000 years ago, Bartz's world and Criley's world were one and the same, but an evil being named Inuo threatened the land. He was able to control the power of the Void, but he was defeated by the 12 legendary weapons we saw previously, and in order to contain the Void, the world was split in two. Between these two worlds was the interdimensional rift, and the Void was trapped there. The splinter Criley has reveals itself to actually be Exdeath in hiding. My fucking god, they will just write anything in this game. He confirms that it was his plan, as now that the Void is no longer in the interdimensional rift, he will harness its full power. He shows this off by void snapping Castle Tycoon and Lena. Guido, Exdeath, and the party have a weird shoonie fight. At some point, they all get warped outside where Guido recognizes they are next to the Library of Ancients. Entering the library, the scholars tell Guido that they found the second half of the sacred tome. Cool, let's call an emergency war room meeting. At this point, I need you to understand that as I write this, I am conked out on heavy opioids as I recover from surgery, and I feel like this story is meant for my experience because shit is just happening. Anyways, now that we have both halves of the sacred tome, the first half never really being an important item as far as I remember, the tome details what the plan is going to be. We need to unseal the 12 legendary weapons, and to do that, we need 4 tablets strewn across the land. These 4 tablets will only make themselves appear with the tome, and they are well guarded. So, as much as my head hurts, Guido tells us that given the hints of the tome, the first of these tablets should be at the Pyramid of Moor. Sick. Let's go. I need a break from the story to go hit things until my head feels better. Passing by the Guardian Tree, we see that the forest is regrowing. That's nice. Passing by the Moor Desert, we see the sands are no longer moving because the Earth Crystal was shattered. That's not nice. Over at Moor, we can trek through the hidden forest and find one of the iconic weapon choices in Final Fantasy V. You are given the choice of either the Brave Blade or the Chicken Knife. The Brave Blade is extremely powerful, but it loses power for every time you have ran from battle, whereas the Chicken Knife is very weak, but it gains power the more battles you flee from. I have run from like 3 battles, so I went with the Brave Blade. At the pyramid, we encounter the first of the 4 Guardians. Elemental Lords from 4, these are not. The gargoyles are kind of pushovers, but they have to be killed at the same time. Killing them separately will make them respawn. Once inside, the pyramid is a monstrous dungeon with all sorts of cool designs. Traps, puzzles, monster boxes, mazes of roaming enemies, shifting platforms, lots of really cool dungeon planning that benefits the vibe of a mysterious Indiana Jones pyramid exploration. The encounters here are also much simpler, since we are still lacking Lena. Most battles have only 1 or 2 monsters, normally pretty weak and easily dispatchable. Lena was my healer, so I am not complaining. This dungeon is quite long, but because of all the interesting layouts, it doesn't drag in the slightest, and is one of the more fun treks I've done so far. At the end of this maze, we find the first tablet, and do not have to fight anyone for it. The pyramid telescopes us out to the top so we can see a somewhat dragon-shaped peninsula turn into the King of Dragons, Bahamut. And also, the airship is coming our way too. If we go back to the Guardian Tree, we can see the Windrake drop off Lena, but she is under control, it seems. Exdeath's ass shows up again, cackles like a dickhead, says that one of the Void beings, Meluzine, is controlling Lena, and then Void snaps the Library of Ancients. After this, the Windrake, who I guess is Hiryu, sacrifices himself to knock Meluzine out of Lena's body, and the gang jumps her. Meluzine is heavily based on elemental magic, so I cheesed the shit out of her by putting up Carbuncle Reflect and locking her with Spellblade Silence. The problem is that her elemental weaknesses and immunities will shift, so if she's weak to lightning, she's going to absorb fire and ice. Between finding out what she's weak to, while accidentally healing her for huge chunks, I kinda gave up on finding the weakness and took her out the old-fashioned way with physical attacks. After the fight, Lena starts coming to and tries to explain that they were all in the darkness of the Void. She's back in the party though, and our crew is finally all back together. Getting back to the airship, we watch as Exdeath harnesses more of the void power and he goes on a fucking snapping spree. Castles and towns fall to his void power, as well as Bart's hometown and the fucking Moogle Forest. You fucking monster! Bart gets so emotionally overwhelmed that he flies around the world in rapid succession like that one Superman movie. The path for the rest of the game is clear. We need the other 3 tablets to get all 12 of the legendary weapons and then enter the interdimensional rift to go fuck up Exdeath. Let's do a little roundup. If you go back to the Pirate's Hideout, you can find the spirit of Sildra as a powerful wind summon. Likewise, going back to Jakol Cave gets you met with Odin, who says you can get his summon if you beat him in 60 seconds flat. Even fully hasted, 60 seconds is not a lot of time, so it's better to just summon Cobblepass and rock the dude in one go. Now, this Odin summon is a lot better than previous ones. He still has the insta-kill ability, but now when faced with enemies who are immune to insta-kill, he will instead do a massive single target strike. That's great! Now this summon has a reason to be called. To the south, there is a path of forest that will take you to the Phantom Village, a village lost in the interdimensional rift. This town has secret shops with each merchant that gives you access to the best-in-class items, as well as a side quest to run around the world on Boko. Doing that gets you an armor that auto-casts Image. It's good. There's also a crazy rare blue magic spell to be found by running this shoreline over by the Late Waltz Tower, but I can't guarantee I'm going to spend my time grinding the chance, so let's get back to the hunt. The big bridge now cuts through the previously inaccessible island shrine. It turns out that the temple guardians are always going to be gargoyles, so we know how to handle this one. Once inside, the gimmick for this temple is kind of a sharp decrease from the pyramid. It's a switch and conveyor belt puzzle. Thankfully, the time tax in doing this isn't all that bad because you aren't actually taking that many steps and thusly incurring random encounters, but it's got nothing compared to the tricks and traps of the last one. I also found an enemy that used all the level blue magic I was missing, and I was the correct level for all of it. Finally, we get the second tablet. Fuck! Not this guy. He literally has 33,000 health. Finally, we get the second tablet and we have to face off against this dickhead. Wendigo is a very easy boss fight, but it's a tedious and annoying one. Basically, only one of the Wendigos are real and can take damage. Every time you hit him, he lets you switch into another Wendigo. If you use multi-targeting attacks, the Wendigos will all counter with Frost, so your team has to just keep guessing and pot-shotting him. If you put up Golem Summon, there's almost no risk because Wendigo rarely attacks with anything more powerful. It's just the time investment to beat him. Afterwards, we get a shot of Fork Tower, where the barrier to the entrance has fallen. Krylie reads from the tablet a passage about how Fork Tower has the most powerful white and black magic, and how it needs to be defeated in unison. So, off we go that-a-way. Fork Tower is very cool, but it takes a moment to figure out what's going on. When you get inside, you need to Scooby-Doo split up, gang. Half taking on the Black Tower, and half taking on the White Tower. The Black Tower is filled with powerful spellcaster enemies, and the White Tower is home to physical bruisers. It took me a while to figure out you need to be using magic against magic and physical against physical. Otherwise, some enemies will instantly counter you to death. The climb of each tower is pretty short, so at the top you need to both take on the bosses in unison. First up is the Minotaur, which is a motherfucker because your magic is actually fully disabled for this fight. I was using healing magic abilities, and they were literally offline. This made for a tough fight trying to stabilize myself against his damage, and I ended up blowing a number of rare elixirs just to keep myself in the DPS race. After Minotaur falls, you have to do battle with Shadow Wizard Money Gang, who is much easier. Having dual summoners gave me access to crazy damage, and I remembered that if I summoned Carbuncle, I could literally render this guy useless. For completing the tower, you get the best white and black magic in the game, Holy and Flare. With Fork Tower crashing to the ground, we see the entrance to the old lair crop back up. Inside, Sid and Mid are back, and they will upgrade your airship to have submarine powers. In a move that really feels like the precursor to the sunken Gelnica from FF7, you can now use the submarine to access the sunken Walsh Tower. You only have 7 minutes of breath to clear it, but there are some treasure chests that replenish your air. At the bottom, you will find the last crystal shard, the one you lost all the fucking way back at the water crystal, but it is being held by famed Mimic Go-Go, the ultimate gimmick boss. Famed Mimic Go-Go will tell the party that he is really serious about mimicry. If you attack, he will attack you back. If you cast a spell, he will cast an exact replica. If you do absolutely nothing for like a full minute, he will congratulate you for understanding the art of mimicry and give you the last crystal shard, and thusly your last job, the Mime. It's time to talk about the endgame. The Mime is one of 2 endgame classes, the other being your starting class of Freelancer. We've been doing this for a while, so let's go over what happens now. Both Freelancer and Mime do not have stat modifiers. Instead, they take the best possible stat modifiers of any class that character has mastered, as well as any innate support abilities those classes have. However, when it comes to command abilities, the 2 classes differ. Freelancers can use any weapon, and because they do not have a job skill, they can instead equip 2 job abilities. Mime, on the other hand, does not get universal access to weapons, but does get 3 slots for job abilities, but they sacrifice the standard attack and item commands. Here's my final crew. Bartz has Monk, Ninja, Ranger, and Mystic Knight mastered, meaning I can dual wield into Rapid Fire plus Spellblade buffing if needed. Lena has Monk, White Mage, Time Mage, and Geomaster mastered, making her literally a monk with white and time magic. She rocks the Kaiser Knuckles to benefit her as an unarmed fighter. Krylie has Thief, Summoner, and Beastmaster mastered with all the levels of black magic available. I didn't master Black Mage because Summoner has the better magic stats. I also didn't master Chemist because I just wanted her to have mix. Finally, Ferris was the big experiment, and I think it kind of failed. Ferris has Red Mage, Black Mage, and Summoner mastered. She was my dedicated Blue Mage, but Blue Magic not working with dual cast kind of threw the whole plan in the fire. She can either dual cast Black and Summon magics, or dual cast one of them while having access to Blue Magic. It's not as graceful as I wanted. This is my gang going through the rest of the game. Swimming to the Great Sea Trench, we find our next dungeon. Get the fuck out of here, gargoyles. As the dungeon, this place sucks because it's easy to get turned around and do more random encounters. But as far as theming, this is the best Final Fantasy has ever done. This deep below the sea, all monsters are unknown, and they are some of the most grotesque abominations the series has ever seen. Nearly formless and secreting ooze. This is fucking nettle. Also, there's a small appearance by the last of the dwarves, giving you an endgame shop. Lie-ho! The bosses of this dungeon are like super gargoyles. You have to defeat them all at the same time. I just spammed Sildra Summon. You get the 3rd tablet, and as an added Benny, you get the most powerful time magic, Meteor. The last dungeon is the Ice Story Falls. Fuck you, don't care. A beautiful dungeon, but sadly, kind of a ho-hum one. I think by this point they just ran out of ideas because this is the weakest of the 4 dungeons by far. But if thrills and chills are what you're looking for, fret not, because you can run into this fucker. We grab the last of the tablet freely, and although some dickhead tries to stop us, he is blown out of the water by the emergence of Leviathan. Leviathan is a motherfucker of a fight, mainly because he can attack twice in one go, and when that means double tidal wave, there aren't a whole lot who can survive that. Thankfully, Bartz had on a coral ring, so he would absorb water attacks, but otherwise, it was very difficult to stabilize against such aggression. It took a while, but eventually I took Leviathan down, got his summon, and left with all 4 tablets. At Castle Kazu, we can now unseal the 12 legendary weapons. But first, we have a random encounter with X-Death's Soul. He likes to do one-hit KOs, but if you hit him with all your big stuff, especially Holy, he goes down simply enough. Once inside, each tablet will allow you to unseal 3 weapons before crumbling and needing to be replaced. This is so you can unseal them between dungeons, but I was lazy and didn't care. Honestly, kinda takes a while. Alright, last couple pieces of cleanup. Get the Black Chocobo from the Phantom Village and fly to the desert in the northeast. First, we are going to Phoenix Tower, a gauntlet of sorts where it's 30 floors, and every floor or so has 2 doors. Choose correctly and you go through. Choose incorrectly and you have to either fight Kazu Beast, a Soul Cannon, a Liquid Flame, or a Bandercarol. All these guys are weaker than normal encounters here, so it's just a time tax. At the top of the tower, you see Hiryu, somehow alive, before he says he wants to help you and throws himself off the tower to fall into flames. This causes Lena to have an extremely late flashback to when her mother was dying and the only cure was a Windrake's tongue, showing that even then she couldn't hurt Hiryu like that. Or maybe she could, it gives you the chance. Regardless, Hiryu turned into a phoenix and we get the Phoenix summon from this tower. Last thing on the list, that big motherfucker who showed up at the beginning of the merged world. At North Tower lies Bahamut, the most powerful summon in the game, and one of the hardest battles. At least I assumed it would be. I kinda super fucked on him with dual cast Flare and Spellblade Flare plus Rapid Fire. It was mad simple. Hopping through the void, we find ourselves in the interdimensional rift, which looks like a desert. Before entering the ruins, we get to meet our host of boss gauntlet baddies, all of which are waiting for Exdeath to command the power of the void. Go through the ruins, go through the Phantom Village, which is frozen in time, and go through the forest, and we meet our first boss, Calofisteri. I don't know what she does because I one-turned her with my summons. Go through the cave, meet the optional super boss Omega, get holy fuck! Okay, so this guy is no joke. He's only weak to lightning and almost immune to everything else, but he also has Reflect Perma on him, and the worst part is that Rocket Punch ignores status immunities. Bartz has on a ribbon, which classically stops all status effects, and Ruby Slippers, which stop confusion, and here he is still getting confused. With a little luck, you can get a plan started, but I had multiple runs that died to frame 1 Atomic Ray, so maybe I come back to this, or maybe I don't do it because I don't fucking care. In the library, you fight Anpanda. One Spellblade Firaga combo reduces him to ash. Literally. Go through the tower, and let me explain my trick here. I have both Krylie and Ferris holding air knives, which boosts wind magic, making Syltra summons do stupid damage for scant MP costs, especially since they both have golden hairpins to have MP pricing. Get to the castle, smoke Altroit, who turns into Jurva Avis. There are multiple of these bosses and none of them matter. Smoke the Catastrophe, don't know what he does. Save a girl, get a smooch. Smoke Azumegia, he seemed like a wizard, but I guess I'll never know. See the girl again, who transforms into Halicarnassus, and this one we cannot smoke. Halicarnassus will immediately change the pace, frogging and row swapping your party. She will also counter any summon attack with an instant death strike. Also, this fight is on a bit of a timer because at turn 8, Holy comes down and deals straight 9s. I did wipe to this one on the first go, but with a second attempt not using summons, I bagged it up pretty quickly. Twintania is the last boss and can also not be rolled up and smoked. The sheer amount of party-hitting spells he throws out requires a serious defensive effort to stabilize through. Unless you're like me and Bartz just keeps tanking it, letting everyone else die, and Spellblade comboing Twintania to Swiss cheese. Finally, with the castle behind us, we are in the interdimensional rift proper. Here we go, the final area, and some of the monsters here are gonna let you know it. You gotta blow the big spells on everyone because it's no cheap fights from here on out. However, the first person we meet is Gilgamesh, ready as always for battle, at least until he recognizes that it's us. Truthfully, he's having a really rotten time in the rift and wants to get out. Bartz is a good chap and tells him which way they came through. Before Gilgamesh leaves, he muses on if the 5 of them can go adventuring. He knows you have to save the world right now, but maybe, just maybe, after all of this, you could consider him a friend? Oh, I love him! He's the best! Now, through the rift, we will find a treasure chest hiding the second super boss, Shinryu. I didn't do Omega, I'm not interested in doing this guy, and he wipes me in a single tidal wave, so I know when I'm out of my league. Maybe the tone of my voice is showing this, but I'm eyes on the prize right now. The penultimate boss is Necrophobe, A Griffith-looking ass character who tells you he is invincible as long as his barriers are up. Thankfully, Mega Flare Go Burr. With his defenses down, he's a bit of a pushover, but when you least expect it, help arrives. He didn't leave. In fact, he came back to help fight.
Criley! Your grandfather was a formidable warrior. You should be proud of him. Lena! Your compassion towards animals is admirable. Never lose that purity in your hearts. Ferris! Try falling in love or something. You might learn a thing or two about yourself. And Bart! I always wanted to face you one last time. Mano a mano. You have excellent companions. I am envious of them.
Enough of this. Die!
Ha! I believe that is my line!
Except, it's a terrible day for rain.
Okay, let's end this motherfucker. We confront X-Death, who turns back into the tree from whence he first came and starts void-snapping parts of the world. He even void-snaps the party, sending them to a spacey nothingness where the Dawn Warriors make their final appearance. The party, alongside the Dawn Warriors and the last-minute help of King Tycoon, hold X-Death back long enough for us to engage. The titanic suit of armor we once knew has been engulfed by the twisted and malformed evil of his tree-like base, a demonic amalgamation of nature and the unnatural. And this punk gets jobbed out in a matter of turns. I hit him with all my heaviest shit. Haste everyone, Spellblade Flare combo, dual cast Bahamut summons. Holy, he only got a couple attacks in. But while he is swallowed by the void returns him as Neo X-Death. A nearly formless abomination where humanoid creatures entangle and intertwine so grotesquely that it becomes hard to see where one stops and the other ends. Nomura, if this is your work, you are a fucking genius. Anyways, same strategy works and I job him out too. He might have attacked once. Sucker ass final boss. With X-Death fully defeated, our heroes find themselves still in the void. But not all is lost, as the crystal shards pull from them and recombine back home to the original crystals. The void-snapped areas come back. The Dawn Warriors and King Tycoon thank them for saving the world, and Criley's Windrake lives to see another day. Sometime later, Mid and Sid get a letter from Criley, explaining all that went down. How the final battle feels like a bad dream. How Criley has traveled around since then. How Boko and Coco had their kids. It's been a year since they saved the world. Bartz is still adventuring, Lena and Ferris run Tycoon, and Criley wants to visit Galif's resting place. She hopes they all meet her there. With so much lost from their fight and so much that came back, Criley is still depressed that she lost her grandfather. Everyone else was able to return to their life, but for her, she is alone now. But of course, she's not alone. Bartz, Lena, and Ferris make their appearances to show that they always have each other. Magically, the forest sprouts a sea of flowers, and we see our heroes running through the field on their steed of choice as credits roll. My final time ends at just shy of 33 hours. I also completed maybe the most epic challenge run ever. I completed all of Final Fantasy V without pooping. More on that after the credits. Final Fantasy V is pretty good, but it's a strange game because I think it's mostly good, but really how you feel about it is going to depend on a number of things and how important they are to you. Like, obviously the big one is that the game has a weak story, but I don't think that's as dire as it's known for. Final Fantasy V has a story associated with it, and it's there the entire time, but routinely things just happen to make sure the plot moves along. That's different from, say, Final Fantasy III, where the game kind of felt like it was about general adventuring until the three-quarter point and then the plot kicked in. To put it in different terms, FF3 feels paced and structured like a Dragon Quest game, whereas FF5 still kind of feels like a Final Fantasy game. There are some fun concepts going on here. The characters are a little flat, but they are enjoyable. The narrative is nonsensical, but you usually get a chuckle out of the writing, and some stuff is legitimately good, like how the wind stops when the wind crystal is destroyed. That's an awesome concept, and it immediately affects the game because you can't sail anymore. A+ stuff. The story is constantly moving, and even if it's not good, it's not being lazy about it. Don't like something? It will surely change in the next 15 minutes. The whole reason this script is bigger than my FF4 one is because the sheer amount of stuff that happens in this story. Instead, what I mean is that Final Fantasy V feels flat if you've been playing all the games like I have. It's kind of the inverse of the method paying off. Instead, it feels like the weight of previous Final Fantasies are dragging it down. To call Final Fantasy V another run at Final Fantasy III feels pretty accurate, but there's a few too many repeated characteristics going on. X-Death feels so much like another Golbez, but shittier. They even kind of look the same to me. The Dawn Warriors are an expanded look at the Warriors of Dark from 3. The Multiple Worlds feels a little too close to the Over and Underworld from 4. And maybe most importantly, the mythos of the Four Crystals is really fucking stale. How many times have I almost gotten somewhere and was just barely too late to save the shiny important item? It's not that all these things are bad per se, but you can tell that the better idea was done elsewhere, or it's diminishing returns trying to expand on the previous concepts. But, as I mentioned, it's the jobs game. The job system in 5 is so much fucking fun to tinker with. You don't have to wait for it to get good, you're off to the races almost immediately. Even within the starting classes, you can start putting rogue abilities onto unrelated jobs and see what comes from it. It feels limitless, and the only negative to the system is that it actually isn't. A huge eureka moment for me was turning Lena into a monk. I did it just on a whim, but as soon as I felt the power of her physical attacks while having strong time magic as a backup, I was in love. The individual jobs are almost perfectly tuned. Most of them seem powerful, and the ones that come off as low ceiling and niche usually have such small mastery requirements that it feels like the developers knew that's how to offset an overall wimpier role. I spent a lot of time thinking of what I could build, and I still regret not thinking of more. So many jobs I barely even touched because I was already set in my path, but shit, I'm certain I could have found uses for Dancer, Bard, or Samurai. The only deflating feeling from the job system is knowing that you can pick one. There are a number of abilities that can't live up to the fact that you only get to add a single augment to your class, and choosing something like summoning animals cannot be justified. Even in the late game with freelancers and mimes, I wish I had more slots to play with some of the lower powered abilities, but there's just no place for drink on a character when I have so much else. I would have liked to have seen some of these job skills not have take up an ability even if they are commands, because again, the justification is so skewed against it. Honestly, it kind of made the latter parts of the game less fun. The job system feels like it's maybe better being about the journey instead of the destination. It's at its best when you are scrounging around with what jobs and augments you have available. When you actually become leveled for the endgame, there is this deflating feeling of seeing so much cool stuff that just isn't good enough to warrant taking up those scant few slots. Even if everything else in this game falls short, and I'm not saying it does, the constant allure of what's next with the job system keeps you engaged. Almost everything introduced in 3 is given a facelift and for the better. Who cares about 99 levels of Dragoon? Instead, just give me as many levels that matter, which is always less than 10.
Post-production Jay here. I am somewhat interested in the 4-job Fiesta. I think that there's a part of me that maybe didn't enjoy my last third of this game because I was just power rolling. I was double casting, flare, I was dual summoning, I was doing everything. And I think the limitations that the 4-job Fiesta brings could maybe have me engage with the game in a different way. But I'm also, like, kind of on the flip side, I wonder if the fact that this is like a 33-hour game and that the majority of what I enjoyed about it was the allure of the job system, and taking that away makes this an even sloggier game to get through because there's so little else that I would find interesting. It's just like, it's something I wanted to put out there. Like, there's a chance I see a better side of this game if I do the 4-job Fiesta, and there's a chance that doing the 4-job Fiesta actually makes my time with this game less enjoyable.
The direct line back to Final Fantasy III is what makes this game interesting to recommend, because even if some of this stuff is a little tired for me, if you were someone who wanted to skip the NES Final Fantasies, I think you could arguably jump into the series with 5. When I talked about Final Fantasy IV, I was raving about how that game felt like the future, and in a lot of ways, 5 feels like the past. It's hard not to read too much into this being Sakaguchi's last game as director, and him spooling together all of his favorite things for one last hurrah before the series started to change hands and change identities, even if interviews say otherwise. Pat from Socks Makes People Sexy deems FF5 as the last of the old school Final Fantasy, with 6 and 7 being liminal entries before 8 kicks off the new school. Previously, I saw this cutoff point as 6 for technological reasons, but I'm really starting to come around on his take on this. Pat details 15 themes, motifs, what have you, that are common core across the old school Final Fantasies, like youth centrism, light and darkness being opposing forces but not always being a good versus evil kind of way, heroes being orphans or parentless, advanced civilizations being something from the past and likely being in the past due to hubris, the importance of the group and the noble idea of sacrificing yourself for that group. When put in that perspective, you can see why 5 feels a bit long in the tooth. These ideas are so intertwined across the first 4 games that by the time we get to the 5th and they are still showing up with little deviation, it just comes off like we have been here before. So as I stated above, if you haven't played the first 3 and/or don't plan to, I think 5 gets you the best distillation of what the majority of old school Final Fantasy was about. And this extends to the gameplay. It isn't just that Final Fantasy V is the second or better run at Final Fantasy III, but that it is the better run at what all non-4 old school Final Fantasies wanted to be. This is the true role-playing game, the game where you can approach it from different angles with different ideas and likely get a sizable amount of replay just from coming back to the game under different builds. There's also so much you could miss. I was playing with a guide like I always do, but back when this was the most recent Final Fantasy, there would have been all sorts of enemies, blue magics, treasures, and whatnot that you could have missed on a first run-through. The game has the vastness that I think the first 3 games wanted to have, so now it feels like the fully realized version of that idea. I don't know where to shove this, so I'm putting it here. I saw a feminist read that really resonated with what I was feeling during the game. This is a very female-led Final Fantasy. Bartz is the main character, but outside of his father's importance and some minor scenes, he really doesn't play the biggest role in the game. Lena and Ferris feel like bigger movers and shakers, either with the plot or with character moments. Galuf is a very plot-critical character, but eventually he gives way to Krylie, someone who is quasi-introduced very early on and pulls a lot of the weight around the narrative herself. After the passing of Galuf, the party is a majority women's affair, and all 3 of them feel like deeper characters and more story impactful than Bart's. It's something worth pointing out because a bit after the passing of Galuf, I really started to notice it, and it was different for both Final Fantasy and kinda games in general, outside of like Phantasy Star 1.
Post-production Jay here. I initially didn't really discuss Ferris's gender in the grander sense because it seems like such a nothing burger in the game. Like, you know, she is presenting to be male for the sake of being a pirate. She is found out to be female, and then that's kind of just it. Like, after that, there really isn't anything that's expounded upon. And so I kind of just was like, okay, well, it's what's in the text. But A, it seems improper to not discuss it, but B, I think the fact that there is so little said about it is actually what's maybe the most interesting thing about Ferris and her gender. The fact that Ferris never is like, oh drat, you found out, I guess I'll just present as a female around you, is also in conversation with the fact that she never says, well, I'm still going to present as a male for my pirates. Like, that's entirely a different thing. There's actually a lot of ways you can read into Ferris's gender that I think are what allows that character to be more interesting to a lot of people and more influential. Because outside of a pretty Princess Ferris getting dolled up, like, the game really doesn't do anything else with that, and that's that's to its detriment, but also to its benefit, if that makes sense. Like, it's a vast nothingness that you can fill yourself if you really want to. I think there's like a way to describe Ferris as like, is she really she/her the entire time? You could really track it either way. And I think a lot of this, if I'm gonna be pedantic, falls down to like, why is there such a disconnect between Ferris's sprite and her concept art? Because it's really easy to be like, yeah, that's Final Fantasy's shorthand for a female character, long purple hair, eye covered, bang, like this is pretty femme. But when you look at the concept art, it's this, you know, very handsome pirate captain. And even today, like, Final Fantasy as a series doesn't really know what they want Ferris to look like, because you'll see like new age renditions of both styles of Ferris. So there's not a whole lot to Ferris's gender, but also I think that's what makes it so, I don't know if I'd say important, but where you could really read into it. And I don't think it's for me to do that legwork, but I can see where people would. And I think readings on Ferris that are more than just assigned female at birth and then presenting as male, I think all those are very valid, because I think the groundwork is there to actually read it as such.
On the more personal takeaway, however, 5 started to drag for me at the third act. The merged world is almost devoid of story motivations, and while it can shore that up with some of the best dungeon designs and optional stuff, it starts getting old. It loses that sense of pacing as encounters start to feel more frequent, while also feeling less engaging. Becoming a team of super soldiers is fun, but the inciting time taxes when exploring a cave isn't. This also affects the last scope of bosses. There are still many interesting ideas left in the hopper, but also many that you just either raffle stomp or have engagement rules that you kind of need to die to once to fully understand. It hampered my enjoyment and made the game come off feeling like an NES Final Fantasy in the worst ways.
Post-production Jay here. I'm dogging on the third world, but it's also, I think, kind of interesting or important to say that the third world suffers because the first and second world aren't really all that interesting either. The world as a whole feels like the same, and so when you visit the world 3 different ways, you don't really notice a whole bunch of differences between them. It's not like there is the second world being so much vastly different culturally, like different types of towns, different types of experiences, different soundscapes, different ideas for things. They all feel like they are the same things sliced 3 different ways, especially in comparison to something like 4. Again, like the overworld and underworld are 2 vastly different biomes, and that feels different. And in 5, there's so many things that just bleed together. Like nothing sticks out in the mind because there's so much of it, and there's not a whole lot of it that feels distinct or different or just is unique in any real way. And I think that does a lot towards why does the game feel so flat the entire time.
I'm about to start encroaching on the inclusion, but all of this is to say that after playing Final Fantasy V, it becomes much more obvious why Final Fantasy VI is so different. I think people look at 6 with a frame of boldness, like they took this popular and established series and flipped so much of it on its head. What bravery, what confidence. And I don't doubt that there is a lot of that at play, but like, what else is there to do in this mold? Throughout 5 games, the team at Square was able to push on nearly every edge within their concept of Final Fantasy that if Final Fantasy VI was another Euro medieval fantasy game about crystals, it would feel bland. They had to reinvent themselves because they did everything they could in this space for now. It's that which makes Final Fantasy V feel like such a coda, the last hurrah of everything Sakaguchi and crew learned while making these games. It perfectly sends off the old ideals of Final Fantasy and whets the appetite, so that when the radical Final Fantasy VI would appear, it would be exactly what the players are licking their lips for. Ironically enough, with this being the first episode to mention Sakaguchi's distaste for sequels, Final Fantasy V is the first Final Fantasy to have any sort of sequel attached to it. In 1994, animation studio Madhouse would release the 4-part OVA, Final Fantasy Legends of the Crystals. Legends of the Crystals is peculiar It's set in the same world as FF5, but 200 years later, so almost none of the original cast are still around. It centers around the same kingdoms and crystals as we saw in the game, and everyone trying to save them. However, it seems like they were given carte blanche about what to do with the story, so the OVA is routinely, nonsensical. Prince being tortured by tickle machines, chocobos are reverted back to their concept art as skinless chickens, lineally absorbing the wind crystal and having it flash through her butt. But that silliness is probably its best aspect. It's a simple story wrapped around by lots of fun flash and action. It's aptly goofy, and it's got some beautiful animation. But would I recommend it as a way to continue the FF5 story? Nah, it feels like something you'd pick up at Blockbuster for a weekend that kind of slaps the Final Fantasy V name onto it. If you enjoyed the shit happens nature of FF5 the game, then you might like the same shit happens nature of FF5 the OVA. But don't get it twisted thinking that this is some canon continuation you need to check out. At the top, we mentioned that this was Sakaguchi's last time directing for Final Fantasy. In 1991, Sakaguchi was promoted to Executive Vice President at Square, and his more corporate role impacted the amount of time he could spend on creative projects. This makes Yoshinori Kitase's role as the writer alongside Sakaguchi so important. As the series continued, Sakaguchi was going to have to give up the oversight that he had had since the beginning, and his baby was entrusted to Kitase moving forward. While Sakaguchi does take a back step, he still has a couple more tricks up his sleeve during his time at Square. Square still held its eggs in their key baskets at this time, the majority of their games on the SNES being Final Fantasy and Saga so far. However, after FF5, another one of their big bombs would drop, Secret of Mana. The Capcom-developed Breath of Fire would be released too, as well as Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Collection and the second Romancing Saga. But I assume all hands were on deck back at the office, working diligently on their next game in the series. Unlike previous entries, all of which I believe had kicked off development before their predecessor had released, the newest Final Fantasy would not start development until 5 was out the door. Likely, that's because of the amount of manpower needed to make this game a reality left little room for any distractions. Next time we check in on Final Fantasy, we are going to see something very different. A massively sprawling JRPG that looks almost unrecognizable next to its kin, and a game many still hold to this day as the best Final Fantasy ever released. Maybe Final Fantasy V was deemed too difficult for Americans, but the States were about to get their third game in the series, ready or not. And brother, we were ready.
Welcome to the secret, not so secret Post-Mortem. I'm just recording it on my phone. We won't be here very long. I'm not dragging all the hardware out for this thing. If you remember at the very end of the story section, I mentioned how I did a super epic complete gamer move, and I got a challenge run done by beating Final Fantasy V without pooping. Eagle-eared followers of the channel may have known that I was going in for surgery at the end of last year, and coming out of surgery is when I played Final Fantasy V, and also Final Fantasy VI. I was recovering for a while. This is a PSA to anyone who's having surgery. They don't tell you this. You need to slam laxatives the second you get out of surgery, because your gastrointestinal, digestive, whatever, it shuts down post-surgery. I did not marathon Final Fantasy V over 33 straight hours. I did it over a week, and the entire time I was constipated because my body could not poop. I was bedridden, and when you are bedridden, your body don't poop anymore. So this is a PSA to anyone who has to have surgery like that, where you are bedridden. You need to hit this off at the front. You cannot fix this halfway through. You need to know ahead of time. Don't be like me. It was miserable. It was fucking miserable. It was worse than the pain from surgery. I'm being completely honest. This shit was awful. This shit was ass. This shit was diabolical. Anyways, now you know. If you ever have bedridden surgery, laxatives beforehand.
Tell a soul, save a life. Anyways, see you guys later.